Welcome to another episode of Home, Sweet Home. My name is Rod McCall.
And I'm Scott Nichols.
Oh my gosh.
We are, through summer at this point, and we are back in our education environments. So, it's an exciting time of year. And
Because everybody's getting geared, either they're back in school or getting excited to go back to school or dreading going back to school. I'm sure moms and dads are ready for
I think they
go.
love it, right? I think they were excited for it. And you know what? As a teacher, I'm still excited for it. I think it's great.
As long as we're excited.
We like to help kids.
Yes. Makes it fun to come to work.
Right. Hey, so, we did this two-part thing on your story.
Yeah.
And, getting your story out there because, man, is that a dramatic story. And, if the listeners haven't heard it, if, this is the first podcast you're listening to, you need to back up 2 episodes. And you need to go listen to Rod's story because it is emotional, high impact. I mean, this is stuff that sometimes you see in the movies and you just don't realize that people actually go through these things. And so, or maybe you've gone through these things and you might connect with that. But we've told that story. We've given you a chance to really tell that story. And I know that there were parts of that were still very emotional for you, even though it was a long time ago now.
Yeah.
And so, but we wanted to, I know we wanted to continue that, and with the goal here of kind of bringing this out of your story and into how does this relate to everybody else, and what might be the story, how does it connect to the stories that other people have? Yeah. And so I know you wanted to bring that into, talking about high conflict divorce and children and what those results might be that those children might have.
Well, exactly. There was a method to our madness here. People get divorced. It's a worldwide phenomenon. And,
right.
I mean, but you just don't realize what it is until you go through it.
Right.
And so, I mean, in 2017, 41% of children were in a divorced home.
Holy mackerel.
As a matter of fact, in the United States in 2020, so this was 4 years ago. All right, this was before COVID really did its thing.
Wow.
There were over, 5.8 million kids under the age of 17 living in a single divorced household.
Wow, that's astonishing.
Yes, absolutely. And it was because of my experience that I needed to know more about what happened.
Right.
I mean, I'm an educator, and now I'm a researcher, and so I've been, with the book For the Love of Eric, that really propelled me into a whole different world that I never knew existed. And so I'm part of different groups. That's why I'm getting the counseling degree. And so I want to know more, and I'm working to try and make a lot of changes, make a lot more awareness of what goes on with a divorce and the impact, more specifically, it has on kids.
Right.
And I ran across this quote that I'd like to share, and it says, "One's experience matters, both for how it feels in the moment and for the lasting residue it leaves behind, woven into the fabric of a person's brain and being."
So this is like a really lifelong kind of an impact.
Pretty much. There was a study done by a lady by the name of it's Dr. Judith Wallerstein, and this was in the late 1980s, 1987 to be specific.
Okay.
And she was part of a longitudinal study that identified approximately 1/3 of the children involved in a divorce had serious psychological problems, which would manifest itself in issues like depression, poor performance at school, and difficulty maintaining friendships, making them and keeping them.
Okay.
And these are kids. And this isn't just, they're just from a divorce. This doesn't have to be extremely horrible. It's just a divorce because it really upset their world. And and it depends on the age. I mean, if you're a little kid, a preschooler, it might be aggression. It might be hard time sleeping. Might be fear of abandonment. If you're, early elementary, it might be, fantasies of being replaced by somebody else.
Right.
If you are more into, your upper elementary, lower middle school, maybe more anxiousness, a fear of loneliness, and anger.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, for adolescents, Katie barred the door, but here they can act out in many different ways. They can suffer serious bouts of depression, have suicidal thoughts, and really decide, I don't want to ever even get married.
Sure.
And so these are issues that are pretty much across the board for kids that have divorce or they're of a divorce. And so, but the ones that I'm most interested and most concerned about are those from high conflict divorces like mine.
Right.
Because had Eric not been murdered by his mother,
Mm-hmm.
he would have had some problems, a variety of issues. Back in 1999, the CDC and Kaiser Permanente did or released a longitudinal or long-term study titled the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, or the ACEs study, and it identified 10 things that kids go through that create problems for them overall.
Okay.
Impact or impairments to developing normally and successfully.
Right.
And divorce is one of them. One, you can have emotion or physical abuse and sexual abuse. Those are also ACEs. But one else that they identified that is not it's hard to prove, is emotional abuse and emotional neglect.
Right.
And having a family member die by suicide is also identified as another ACE. Witnessing violence at home.
Sure.
As well as having a family member with mental illness. And the last one is having a family member or a household member in jail or prison.
Right.
Well,
now, I think this is interesting, right? Because I think that people, obviously, right, they see things like physical abuse, sexual abuse, those kinds of things as being very bad. They understand that those things definitely have an impact on the victim, right? Because you can clearly identify the victim. But I think that just as far as divorce goes, like people don't seem to think that it's a big deal.
yeah.
They seem to think that they can just have that divorce and that sometimes they can even play off the kid, to one another, and like that's not going to have an impact. But the kid, no matter if it's an amicable divorce or a high conflict divorce, is the victim.
Absolutely.
No matter what.
And that's kind of what I am working towards. I'm working with many others, both around the country and around the world, to try and bring an end to. I mean, when your wife was in here sharing some of her stories, some of the things that, inadvertently, I don't think her mom had a plan to do that, but when, she kind of put her over or pitted her against her dad,
right?
Again, the impact. And not all kids are going to have the same responses. Everybody's got a different resilience factor. But the damage can be a lot of times unseen, and it can take years to manifest.
Exactly.
And so, like I say, high conflict are the worst. And when, again, kids are put in the middle, they're the ones that suffer the most. And that's kind of where I'm at. And like I said, I've done a lot of presentations, talked around the country. Recently was down in Houston for an event sponsored by some folks called the Children for Tomorrow. They're a nonprofit organization down there in Houston that works to combat the effects of parental alienation in the court system and the mental health field, bringing education and awareness as well.
Okay.
And so some of the stuff that I'm wanting to talk about today come from that presentation I did a few months ago. And so anyway, I mean, because like I say, everybody fights, but what makes a bad one a bad one? Well, I've got a 1994 definition. And when I'm saying 1994, that this is not new. This is old stuff. Okay. I mean, we're talking 30 years ago, but
divorce and high conflict divorce has been happening forever.
Yeah.
Right? We're only just bringing it to light.
Yeah, because it's the impact is becoming more noticeable. Stuff that was going on in the 70s and 80s. Now these kids are adults and now they're divorcing and they're continuing it on. But a high conflict divorce can be, or as I'd say the definition, high conflict divorce as relations between former partners or spouses characterized by high levels of verbal or physical aggression, overt hostility. God, I wish I could speak today. Overt hostility and distrust.
Okay.
And so when a kid is witnessing mom and dad yelling at each other, physically punching or hitting each other, that's really damaging for them, both short term in their self esteem and their fear factor, but also long term.
Right. I can see the physical issue, right? Like for a
Mm-hmm.
child, I think it's less obvious to people that the yelling is impactful, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, my wife and I have been together we've been married almost 32 years.
Mm-hmm.
I've shared this before. And there are times where, we fought not very often in front of children, right? So it's not something they saw a lot. And sometimes that rattled them, and we saw that rattled them. So we tried not to do that.
And that is when, and like I say, when you go through a divorce, there's always hurt feelings and there's anger.
Mm-hmm.
And you always want people to side with you.
Right.
The difference is, and I think I shared this before, the difference is when it doesn't stop and actually escalates.
Mm-hmm.
In my case, she not only never stopped, she escalated until the very end.
She was going to win.
At any cost.
Exactly.
And when that's your mindset, then it's hooray for me and to heck with everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And usually it is the child or children that wind up in the middle and they suffer the most. I mean, I had a girl in my class a couple of years ago, and she was going off to the University of Wyoming.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, oh my gosh, that's a long ways away. And she goes, well, that was as far away as I could get with a school that was going to offer me a full ride scholarship. She said, I am sick and tired of my mom and dad continuously fighting.
Right.
And her mom and dad had been divorced for years, but they kept pulling her into the middle of their fights and arguments. And she got us, Wyoming's a long way from North Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but that was, again, an example of kids being caught in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to be in the middle. Don't make them choose, because when you make them choose and you badmouth the other parent, well, then you're badmouthing them, the kid, because the kid is half you and half the other parent.
Right.
So stop. And
there's a loyalty issue, right? Like, so the kid loves the mom and loves the dad.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're bad mouthing the mom, now it's like, how am I supposed to feel about mom? How am I supposed to feel about dad?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like that's not the way that we should go about, a relationship.
Well, no, not at all. And and some of the other problems that these kids can have once they start becoming adults is they tend to make really poor life decisions. This can include early experimentation. We're talking as young as 5th and 6th grade. So we're talking 10, 11 years old, experimenting with drugs, experimenting with alcohol and becoming addicted at a very early age.
Right.
Experimenting with sex, high-risk behaviors, even having kids out of wedlock. They have a hard time trusting other people. They're less likely to get married. Oh, they might live with somebody, but they sure as heck aren't going to get married because, well, there's going to end in divorce anyway.
Right.
They have higher rates of unemployment because of their inability to stay focused for, just about anything. Their stress, anxiety, fear of commitment. And what's worst of all is these kids have an increased risk of suicide or suicidal ideation.
That's a big word, man.
Oh,
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Thinking about suicide.
Okay.
Thinking about killing themselves, saying to themselves, the world would be better if I went to sleep and never woke up.
Yeah, so I think that that's a problem because a lot of kids are on social media. And you know how the social media algorithms work. So if you start thinking about that kind of stuff and maybe you start looking into it, then you start getting fed those kind of things, and it starts driving your thought process and takes you deeper down that road. right?
Uh-huh.
So if any kid is getting into that suicidal ideation, like it might actually get worse.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is, in a 2020 study done by, anyway, in a 2020 study, it said that kids from divorce are at higher risk of poor academics, psychological issues, social issues, and self adjustment concerns, worried
Mm,
about their ability to fit in and deal with the normal life problems that come our way.
sure.
And so, and these are the kinds of things when they fail to adjust to be able to handle the normal kinds of things that kids have to do. And honest to God, and I hated growing up. I hated being a teenager. I
Mm.
had a hard time fitting in. I was a tall, geeky, gawky, uncoordinated, unathletic, skinny as a rail kid.
So we were like twins.
I guess so.
Okay.
And it was tough. And, and when you throw in, the issues of divorce and your inability to cope with that, and then you can't cope with the other stuff,
Sure.
it's easy to understand why. It's you become willing. Maybe that's not the right word, but you're more likely to be persuaded to do drugs, persuaded to engage in alcohol, put yourself in risky situations that you might wind up having premarital sex or early sex at 12, 13
Yeah, I
years
mean,
old.
well, when you want people to accept you, right?
You'll do anything.
Often, especially teenagers, right? They'll do
Hmm.
all sorts of things that are harmful.
You're doing that normally. You throw in
Right.
all the problems that divorce, especially high conflict divorce, adds to the trauma the kid has gone through and hasn't
Yeah.
resolved.
I mean, even
Um,
adults do that, right? They try to
mm,
they try to fit in and they try to do things, and they'll oftentimes go outside of maybe what their character seems to be to try to please somebody and be a part of, right? Be accepted into a group.
and that's the thing, and that's kind of what I try and do is bring more awareness. Take a lot of these studies that are done, a lot of the research, and compile it and put it together and make presentations to put out there, especially to mental health professionals, to the legal profession.
Hmm.
Because here's a sad, horrible fact: lawyers make a crap ton of money off of divorce.
Yeah.
And one of the first things you have to provide in divorce is a financial, uh, I don't know what you want to call it, but basically you have to give out your financials. How much money you have,
Sure.
how much money you make, how much money you have in bills and debt. And a lot of times lawyers will, because there's a lot of unscrupulous lawyers out there, I've met a number of them,
Hmm.
that will milk you for as much as they can. And then once you're out of money, now we solve the problem. Now the divorce comes to a quick halt.
Wait, so you mean it's not just $99 like I see on the side of the road all the time?
No,
$99 divorce, it doesn't
no.
happen.
Crying out loud. A lot of times now it was a $2,500 retainer
Yeah.
for me to get started. And it was $150,000 when we were all done. And
Right. Wow.
that was 2010 to 2011. That was an
Well, I
18
consider
months.
myself lucky then because I've never had to do that and never even thought of it.
Oh no! In fact, both two very good friends of mine that are family law lawyers here in North Texas, their rates are
Wow.
650 an hour,
An hour.
and an hour, yeah.
Wow.
Um,
I
and
mean,
but the average lawyer here in Collin County, well, not just Collin County, Denton County, Dallas County, Tarrant County, so the four counties that make up North Texas, I think is somewhere around 300 to $350 an hour. That's a brand new starting attorney.
wow.
And like I say, there's
So
not
probably not the best attorney.
maybe, but the issue, like I say, it comes down to kids have to be put first.
Sure.
If mom and dad want to divorce. If mom and dad want to fight. But fight for the betterment of the kids, putting kids first. What's their needs?
So our thing was always, I mean, first of all, like I've shared, we've been married for 32 years. Our thing was we're not going to talk about divorce. Like we weren't even going to use the word.
Okay.
And we don't. I mean, maybe we've spoken it once in our time together, but we never really intended for that to be a thing.
Okay.
So I mean, I think that's the first thing. Like if you can actually make a commitment to divorce isn't an option and we're never going to do it. Right. I mean, that's a thing, but I realize that that's not a reality for everybody. Right. I mean, you don't know what happened. I mean, your situation went sideways and there was no way that that was going to work.
Well,
so, I mean, it's different.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. You guys have a commitment to each other.
Right.
And one of the things we used to say in our divorce group, it takes two to get married, but only one to get divorced.
Exactly.
And if that one person says, well, I'm going to do it, I don't care.
But then the only way that we could stick to we don't talk about divorce is to say, and partly, it was our kids are more important.
Yes.
Right. And so one of the things that we always wanted our kids to be in a better situation than we were and all that. So that's part of the whole reason for that. But in the end, we made a commitment that, we just don't fight in front of the kids.
Yes.
I mean, it just doesn't happen. I'm not saying we never fought, right? We disagree, and we still disagree often, right? And it just, we don't have that discussion or that fight in front of our kids. And over time, right, that becomes easier, right? And 32 years in, like, that's not a problem.
Yes.
But, everybody has that first year of marriage where it's like you're trying to figure out how to live with this other person that you've never lived with before. And it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And everybody gets frustrated because I want to do things my way and you want to do things your way and my way's better. Right. And then you have kids, you introduce kids into the environment and it's like, no, I want to discipline them this way and you want to do it that way. Or I want to go out and you don't want to, and whatever the argument might be. And I'm sure there's much worse arguments than those things, but you just don't have it in front of the kids.
Well, exactly. And one of the things that there are two huge things that came to me in my research was not only the increased risk of drug and alcohol use, but was the issue of suicide. And there's a bigger movement in public schools. I would imagine Catholics or private schools too, but I'm not in private schools anymore. But a lot of public schools to draw awareness of suicide. And I looked at a study provided, and this is just in the state of Texas. Okay. In the state of Texas from 2000 to 2020. So in 20 years, the suicide rate for 10 to 14-year-olds increased 35%.
Holy smokes.
In the same time period, and these are successful. These aren't the ones that attempted. These are the ones that actually were successful in it.
Oh, my goodness.
15 to 19-year-olds in that same 20-year period increased 40%.
Man. And the thing is, I mean, we're putting these things out there for kids. I mean, 15-year-olds shouldn't be looking at what's happening to them at the moment as like the worst possible thing in their life, right? I mean, much harder things generally come down the road. But we're not helping them by putting this hard stuff that they have no capability of coping with on them, and then not even helping them with any of it, right? We're just doing it in front of them and letting them see it and never being able to work through it in any kind of a way when they shouldn't even have to see it or know about it to begin with.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, putting kids, one of the first things that Eric's mom and I did do was get Eric a therapist and put him in with a play therapist. But this lady quickly became very clear that she was as competent as a clown, as a circus clown.
Sure.
And absolutely worthless. When I finally was able to get
buyer beware. Right?
Yeah, no kidding. When I was finally able to get him into a more competent, intelligent, worthwhile counselor, well, then his mother totally go, ooh, no, I can't manipulate this therapist like I could the original one. And so basically stopped taking him. But you need to have a good, competent therapist to help the kid. Right. And when you can do that, we can help our children make it through the difficulties of divorce.
Right. Hey,
Anyway,
I mean, if you've taken the route to get married, that's great. If you're thinking marriage isn't the way to go or it's not good, I don't understand that. But my situation, right, is different. My story is different than a lot
hmm
of other people. But I think that marriage is the greatest thing ever.
oh
I
yeah,
think that the commitment between two people, religious or not, right, is just the greatest thing, right? You're putting somebody else first. You're loving on them. You're doing the things. Now, sometimes it doesn't work, right?
hmm
I mean, clearly, there's the things, but it can work, right? And it's hard work, but you have to put yourself aside. It's the same with kids, right? Like if you're going to take the responsibility to bring a child into the world,
yeah,
like you need to make sure that your life is kind of about that child now and not
yeah,
about you,
yes,
right? So it's tough because we're selfish, right?
yeah. We can
But
be
we
very.
have to have that focus, right? We have to have that focus that that child needs to, be nurtured in a good way, not a
hmm
bad way, because you're nurturing them either way.
Oh yes.
It
Oh
just
yeah.
might not be a good way.
What exactly? Kids. Well, yes, they learn from what they see.
If I take a
And
sponge and I put it in a nice soapy water, it's going to get soapy water, right? If I put it in a
hmm
muddy water, it's going to get muddy water. Like the
uh-huh.
sponge is still going to work. It's still going to suck up whatever I give it,
hmm
and that's the same thing with a kid.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm with you about marriage. I swore after ending things ended with Eric's mother. I said I will never get married again. It'll
Yeah.
be a cold day in hell before I get married. And then Sherry becomes an integral part of my life.
hmm
And I was at a wedding for a friend, and the preacher said, "You don't marry somebody you can live with. You marry somebody you can't live without."
Right.
And I realized I didn't want to live life without her. And I have to say that Marriage 2.0 has been a million times better.
Yeah.
And we put, we focus a lot on our kids, and and they're really developing into quality adults.
Well, I never got to see your marriage 1.0, and I'm sort of glad for
Yeah,
that.
it wasn't pretty.
I've heard enough about it, but I've seen your marriage 2.0, and I think that that's wonderful, right?
Yes.
That you've been able to come out of this terrible story that you have with a purpose and with a better marriage, and with this ability now and this desire to help kids
Yes.
and families. And I mean, that's the whole reason for the podcast. So,
Yes. Absolutely. It really
I mean,
is.
we have fun with a lot of topics, but
We do.
ultimately, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, we're hoping that somebody's listening who's getting something out of it.
Yes.
So,
Totally agree.
I mean, I think that might be it for today, right?
Yeah, because I mean that's pretty much my presentation that I gave in a nutshell, and we're pretty much on the end of our time anyway.
Well, that's awesome. I just want to encourage listeners to like and share at whatever platform
Yeah,
you're using. Subscribe. Listen to go back and listen to the other two episodes if you haven't heard them. It's a moving story and Rod has a book as well. So there's a lot of opportunity for you to take a look into that story and understand what it is that we're trying to do here.
yeah. And if you want to know more about parental alienation, there's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of websites, a lot of YouTube videos. I've got a bunch of stuff that I put up on a website based around the book titled fortheloveoferic.com. That's ERYK.
Mm-hmm.
It's an old German spelling from my German heritage.
Mm-hmm.
But again, educate yourself, learn what it is, and help your kids. Help them.
Yeah. And we've got a couple of Rod's websites attached to the podcast, so
Yeah.
you can look it up in your podcast
And let us know too
platform.
on our email. Homes, no. What is
It's
our?
on the podcast.
Okay, yeah. Let us know via email.
Send us an email.
Yeah,
There's a link.
absolutely.
All right. I think that's it.
All right. Well, I guess until next time, I'm Rod.
I'm Scott.
See ya.
Have a great one.